The entire contents of this podcast and website are based upon the opinions of Tammy Garcia and her guests, unless otherwise noted. The information on this podcast is not intended to replace a one-on-one relationship with a qualified healthcare professional and is not intended as medical advice. It is intended as a sharing of knowledge and information from the research and experience of Tammy Garcia and her guests. This is the Naturally Inspired Podcast, coming to you from our 1890 homestead in Johnstown, Colorado. I'm Tammy, and I want to thank you for joining us. Let's get started and help people feel good so they can do what they love for longer. Today on the Naturally Inspired Podcast, we have Kristy Hall, and Kristy holds a master's degree in holistic nutrition. She also holds several certifications. She is a certified health coach through Dr. Sears. She's board certified in holistic nutrition. She's a registered consulting practitioner, a registered orthomolecular health practitioner. She's certified in culinary genomics. She's a medical nutrition therapy certification as well. She's a gluten practitioner, and currently she is working on a heart math certification. So welcome, Kristy Hall, to the Naturally Inspired Podcast. Hey, thank you so much for being on the Naturally Inspired Podcast, Kristy. We're so lucky to have you here today with all of your credentials, and I'm really excited to dive in and get started.
Good.
So let's get our listeners a little bit acquainted with you. So where were you born?
So I was born in Texas.
Okay.
I grew up in East Texas in Longview, and I graduated from Texas A&M University.
Nice.
In 1989. Yeah, so I'm an Aggie.
Nice.
And immediately went to work in nonprofit health. So I went to work for the American Diabetes Association.
Oh, interesting.
And then the American Cancer Society. Yeah. So I knew that I wanted to work in the world of healthcare, but I have my degree is in speech communication. So when I went to work in nonprofit health, I started off as a generalist, and then I ended up specializing in the fundraising end.
Oh.
Yeah. So I was not in client, patient care at all.
Right.
And I ended up at the national office of the American Cancer Society, managing their special events. And I lived just outside of Atlanta for many years. For about 10 years, I lived there. And that's where I had a family, had 5 kids. And then about 10 years ago, I moved to Colorado.
Oh, okay. So you're fairly new to Colorado.
Right? Just a little. Yeah, and I love it. I love it out here. As a kid, I vacationed out here, did some mountain climbing with my church youth group.
Okay.
And fell in love with the mountains. And so just kind of followed my heart out here to these mountains.
Nice. And what's your favorite thing about living in Colorado?
It's being outside, and really the mountains are my happy place.
Yeah.
Just living so close to Rocky Mountain National Park, and the backpacking and the hiking and the whitewater rafting, and I just love that.
Just an outdoor lifestyle. That's really what Colorado's all about, for sure.
Yeah, it is. It's great.
Well, that's awesome. That's awesome. We're glad you're here. You're and close to us. Loveland, Colorado, right?
Right. Super happy to be here.
Yeah.
Right.
So tell us, how did you get interested in natural health with your background being what it was?
Right.
Yeah. How did it turn into natural health for you? What was your story there?
So, when I became a mom, it was with actually my second daughter who had a lot of health problems. So I had been nursing her, and then weaned her when she was about a year old, 13 months old, and the doctor wanted her on whole milk, and she didn't like it. She wouldn't drink it. So he said, well, just put a bunch of Hershey's chocolate syrup in there. So I just added a big, and of course I'm serving her.
What year was this? What year was your daughter born?
She was born in 98.
Wow. And that was the suggestion in 98?
Yeah. So I had my plastic sippy cups that I would fill with my the, homogenized, pasteurized whole milk with my big serving of Hershey's chocolate syrup, and I would put it in the microwave and heat it. I know it's horrifying now, right? It's like, oh my gosh. And her health started to suffer. And, that was the only way she would drink milk.
Okay.
It had all this chocolate syrup in it, and if it was heated. And so pretty quickly, her health just started going downhill. She ended up being covered in eczema from her little eyelids all the way down to her feet. Very red, angry eczema. She had just a constant stomach ache. She never wanted to play. Here she was approaching her second birthday and just never had any energy and had horrible dark circles under her eyes. And I went to the doctor and I said, I am sick and tired of my child being sick and tired. And he looked at her and he said, you're right, there's something wrong.
Yeah.
And he ran a bunch of tests. And I said, what are you testing? And he said, I'm not going to tell you. If you need to know, I'll let you know. So I said, okay, and I trusted him, and they took lots of blood and ran a bunch of tests, and he called me back a few days later and said, she's fine. There's nothing wrong with her.
Wow. Okay.
And I said, wait a minute. You yourself said she looks, something's not right.
Yeah.
And so
then the eczema all over her body's not normal.
Right. Yeah. So he sent us to an allergist, and they did IgE testing for corn, dairy, and I can't remember what else it was. Okay. And she did not have an IgE allergy. Only about 7% of the population does. So no big.
What does IgE stand for?
So it's one of the immune components. So it's an immune response to food. So when somebody has an IgE reaction, say to peanuts, they're going to have anaphylactic shock, right? So they're very strong, very immediate reaction.
Okay.
So she didn't have any IgE reactions. So then that kind of started me on this path of, well, this isn't, allopathic medicine isn't giving me any answers, and my child is clearly sick.
Right.
But I was the first person in my family to really branch outside the allopathic model. Uh-huh. And we kind of always thought these holistic people were woo-woo and not really legit. And
right. Quackery.
It's a lot of quackery. So I went to my first naturopath, and I don't mind telling you, it was very uncomfortable, way outside my comfort zone. This was, like I said, back in the, probably by this time it was 1999. And
right.
He had a pony.
Well, we're programmed to think a certain way, that doctors have all the knowledge. So I totally understand how you're stepping outside your box.
Right. And he was very hippie, he had the hippie look, hippie vibe, everything.
Right.
And he looked at her and said, well, she's got a problem with her right kidney. And it's like, okay, what do I do about it? He said, well, I'm retiring, go find someone else. Oh. So then somebody invited me to hear a nutritionist from the Mayo Clinic, not a dietitian, but a nutritionist. And so I'm going, it was in a group setting, and he looks across the table at me and my daughter, and he said, she's got a problem with her right kidney. I'm like, how do you know? I guess I can see it in her face. Okay, so it was still a little weird for me. So then somebody else sent me to another naturopath, but she had been a surgical nurse in South Africa. So she had come up through the allopathic ranks and become a naturopath. And for me, that's what I needed to kind of bridge that gap.
Right.
So we went to her. We were in there for almost 4 hours for our first appointment.
Wow.
She ran all kinds of testing on my daughter, and my daughter was allergic not only to dairy, but to all food dyes. And at that time was reacting to all red, yellow, and orange fruits and vegetables. So we started on a 2-year-long elimination diet. And it was very comprehensive. But the eczema went away, the energy came back, this chronic stomach aches went away, and she started playing. She started looking like a healthy little girl. So that was my introduction to, there's another way of looking at health.
Right. And what confirmation you got when she started to get well.
Exactly. And that kid, she went on to run cross country and track in high school and competed at the state level, and really is a very healthy young woman today.
Right. So she just monitors her diet now for those things that are triggers for her?
Yeah, she was able to go back to all the fruits and vegetables. So that's not a problem. She's to this day reacts to food dyes. Dairy, very reactive to dairy, and reacts to pork. So those are the things that
Interesting.
she has to say. Oh, and now she's reacting to gluten, sadly. So,
Oh, no.
but you can eat a very healthy diet without this food. So it's
Right.
working out. Yeah.
Interesting that you would bring up food dyes, because I just kind of had an exchange with someone who feels like the food dyes are not a problem, but they are labeled with warning labels in other countries. And I'm from Canada,
Okay.
and a lot of our products taste different in Canada than they do here.
Yeah.
And when I started looking at the ingredients, I started to realize why. Because there are different ingredients in there. And
Yeah.
these food dyes have been documented to show behavior problems and
Right.
different issues in kids, but yet um, the states is still hanging on to those ingredients like it's okay.
Right. And yeah, and the things that are not allowed in Canada are not allowed in Europe either. So you
Yeah.
know, the food manufacturers that are selling foods in these other countries sell a cleaner product
Yes.
to, you know, our neighbors to the north and over in Europe than what they give us. And it's pretty maddening. But they have
Yeah.
very strong lobbying here in this country. And so we get the lesser product.
Right. Right. And I mean, the proof is in the label. I don't
Yeah.
know how you can really dispute it.
Right.
The proof is right there. I was looking at both labels, and they're definitely
Yeah.
completely different ingredients. So
Yeah.
interesting.
It's frustrating, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is, especially when I noticed, actually, I've been living in the States for a long time now, but I noticed when I moved over here,
Mm-hmm.
um, especially when I first got here, the differences in the taste of dairy and certain products. And so
Interesting.
I just intuitively was like, no, I'm not going to eat that here.
Yeah.
It didn't taste the same. So it
Right.
just threw up a red flag to me. This is way before I was even interested in natural health.
Right. Right.
So
Yeah.
the taste is definitely different. On that note, with taste, there are a ton of different diets out there today, and I can't wait to get into this with you. Yes. I think, especially as women, I think we're more conscious about the diets that are kind of circling around in the media and whatnot, and we're always kind of looking for the best, healthiest diet to turn to.
Right.
And I think a lot of it is centered around weight loss.
Mhm.
Um, and what I want to talk to you about, though, is kind of what the impact to these diets are when we take them on. How do they impact our health, and especially with weight loss?
Mhm.
That's, I think, how we first get introduced to dieting when we're in our late teens and early 20s. So what's the impact of that with these diets?
You know, so you raise a good question, you know, this dieting and what does that look like and why do we diet and how do we diet? And there's a couple of different theories actually on weight loss and supporting healthy weight. One is kind of the caloric theory of calories in, calories out, and
Yeah.
a very simple model. And I think that that's an oversimplification, and it's not a model that I subscribe to. The other is more of a hormone-based model, and it's much more dynamic. And so we're taking into consideration a variety of factors. For instance, your glycemic index or glycemic load of a food. So how is your body responding to the food? How
Right.
high is your blood sugar going? How much insulin is your body producing? Um, do you have insulin resistance or do you have leptin resistance? So those are all important factors. And there's more hormones than that. There's a lot of hormones that are involved. And so I think that, you know, when we're teenagers, especially, we're thinking, oh, calories in, calories out, right?
Yeah.
And when I was a kid, it was the fat thing. It was like, oh, everyone
Right.
must eat low
Low
fat,
fat.
right? And so I remember I was a college student and I wanted to lose weight. So I was going over to go to school in France. And so I wanted to lose weight before I got there, knowing that I didn't want to be restricted. So I went on a super low fat diet and exercised a ton and dropped the weight. So people have, you know, you can drop weight going low fat, you can drop weight going low carb. But really you have to take into consideration so much more than just what are we restricting in the diet.
Right.
You know, and that we want to be really careful when we're restricting fat because our bodies need fat to create hormones, right? And so some
Right.
girls who really went kind of on the extreme, we're going to go really low fat, we're going to do it for long periods of time, kind of wrecked hormones. Um,
Interesting.
and so that can be a big impact. Now we've kind of grown up when it
Yeah.
comes to diets, and we have a lot of choices to choose from. There are people that are vegetarians and people that are vegans and people that are keto and people that are paleo or
Mhm.
caveman, and we have all these different options. And when I study a diet, regardless of what it's called, I look for things that are kind of consistent across the board for all diets.
Okay.
And for diets that are successful, I think we can say beyond a shadow of a doubt that all successful diets rely on whole foods, right?
Okay.
So if it comes in a box, you don't want to eat it, right? We want to eat things that were actually designed to be food. So we want to be eating vegetables. We want to be eating fruits. We want to be eating, if you're a carnivore, you can eat, meat if you're not vegetarian or vegan. You can eat meat and fish and chicken and eggs. And those are all part of a healthy diet. So um, it's really about eliminating or strictly reducing processed foods, because those processed foods are going to have impact on our metabolism, and they can have a variety of impacts on our metabolism. And throw out an example, soy oil. And soy oil is really ubiquitous in our culture.
It
Almost
is everywhere.
yeah, it
When
is.
you really start looking for soy, you will be shocked where soy is.
Yeah,
I remember when I became aware about soy and just how it infiltrates the entire food system.
it does. It absolutely does. And it's very, very processed. And of course, the soy that's grown in this country is genetically modified soy. So we have to, take a, a great deal of caution when we're looking at, okay, is this genetically modified food going to be good for me? But when it comes to oil specifically, and that's what our restaurants are cooking our foods in, and then a lot of the cooking oils on the grocery store shelves are cut with soy oil, only it's not required to be on the label. So,
Oh,
yeah,
so
you
that's
can,
interesting. That's
yeah,
a new piece of information for me. So if you buy olive oil, it could be cut with soy
yeah,
and
you need
it
to be
doesn't have to
really
be on.
careful. That's right. You need to be really careful. So looking for things that are organic is going to be important.
Okay.
I personally I buy my olive oil directly from an orchard in California. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So I buy my olive oil from Chapin Family Orchards. And so I know I trust them. I know them. I trust them that they're going to produce a good product. But we now know there was a study that came out, I want to say in 2015, 2016, about what soy oil does to our metabolism. And so we're talking about an oil that will just wreck your body's ability to produce insulin. And so you'll
Oh,
become much more likely to become obese, much more likely to become diabetic, type 2 diabetic. You're going to become insulin resistant, leptin resistant. And so that soy oil, I tell people that come in my office, is that if you're getting exposed to soy oil, it's going to be really hard for you to have a normal, healthy weight because of the metabolic impact that this oil has on your pancreas. So it has a really big impact. And we think diabetes is all about the sugar, it's all about the flours, it's all about the
yeah.
foods. But the soy oil has a direct impact as well. So we,
Wow. That is new information to me. I
yeah,
did not know that.
and I'm more than happy to share with you the research link. You might want to post it
Yeah,
on the podcast show notes.
absolutely.
It's a really good piece of research that we say, okay, oh, this is really not a healthy oil for us.
Interesting. And I always connected it to estrogen. There's
Okay.
conflicting. Some people, previously had said that this is a good product for women. And
Yeah.
if you buy soy milk, it often has a pink ribbon on it in the grocery store.
Right?
Right? So we're being programmed to think that this is, something good for women.
Yeah.
So that's really interesting.
Here's the thing about soy and is it good for women? It is just way too broad of a brush to say soy is good. And it's even too broad of a brush to say soy is bad.
Okay.
It really depends on the individual. And that's what I love about nutrition and the approach to healthcare is it is very individual.
Right.
So we know like when it comes to estrogen and breast cancers, I think about 2/3 of breast cancers are estrogen sensitive.
Right.
So that's a situation where either a woman has too much estrogen or it's not being properly metabolized by the liver, and that
Right.
can happen for a couple of different reasons. So
Mm-hmm.
in situations like that, we'd say, ooh, be really careful of getting a lot of estrogens in your diet, like from soy milk
Right.
or some of the meal replacement bars. A lot of those are just loaded with soy
Yes.
protein isolates. And anytime you see protein isolate, that's kind of a red flag.
Okay.
So those people, they're really struggling. Now, when women are going through menopause and they have this massive drop in estrogen and the ovaries are shutting down, and so we move from being kind of dependent on our ovaries for the estrogen to now, so we've got some estrogen being made in the brain. If we're really struggling, and a lot of women do, that's when we'd want to bring in some whole plant forms, or we might want to do a soy-based supplement. It's
Okay.
going to provide a nice, gentle form of natural estrogen.
Mm-hmm.
But in a situation like that, we're looking for organic based, non GMO.
Right.
And we're looking for things that are very specific to supporting that individual's body that's not going to raise a risk for breast cancer and things like that. So
Okay.
it's just an oversimplification to
Yeah.
to say, oh, it's all good or it's all bad. It really depends on the person.
Right. And so how is this kind of overabundance of soy in our diet affecting our young girls?
Oh, and not just the girls, but the boys too. You think about soy formulas. I was at a conference, the Weston A. Price, love Weston A. Price Foundation, and I heard a speaker a few years ago talking about soy formulas. It's like giving a baby boy 30 birth control pills in a day. So, I mean,
Wow. That's shocking.
yeah,
That's a shocking reference.
right. And so we have to be really careful. Like, that's not a good idea.
No.
Not a good idea. So
No.
I'm personally not a fan of soy. Although if I have a vegan in my office
Mm-hmm.
and we are planning a healthy diet, it's really
Yeah.
hard to get away. You can't really avoid
Right.
soy.
You need
We have
those
to be very
proteins.
careful, right?
Mm-hmm.
Really careful. So we're looking at things like miso, where it's naturally fermented, and different things like that. So we have other options. But generally speaking, I've really kind of shied people away from using soy. It's
Right. There's just too many different outcomes that could be possible.
right. And when you're,
Sounds like.
two-thirds of the population or the people with breast cancer, if it's estrogen sensitive, you don't want to bring that in.
Right.
So in my family, we have a history of breast cancer. So that's something we're very careful with.
Right. Now you mentioned a few key terms there like paleo and, and keto, and this is really where I want to dive in because I think everyone's searching for the proper diet, and we've established, it's really individual. But
Right.
sometimes when we get really passionate about a certain diet that's maybe worked for one person or another person,
Mhm.
it almost, quite honestly, I find it becomes a bit of a religion for
It
people,
does, yeah.
and
People, yeah, right. They
yeah.
get
They get passionate about that diet.
and you can't. If you disagree with them, they take it as a personal assault. But it's like, no.
Right. Right.
So that's funny you should say that. So, there is no one diet for all mankind. I kind of
Yes.
laughed. I think I saw a title of the book, the diet for all mankind. I'm like, really?
Yeah.
No.
I love that your approach is like that because that's kind of what I've discovered over my journey of natural health, that there's no one way right for one person. Some people like integrative medicine, some people only do holistic, some people are all allopathic, and that's fine.
Yeah,
That's fine, but it really isn't an individual thing, and that goes for diet as well.
right. So it's good to have choices.
Yes.
So we can dig into some of these diets. So what diet do you want to start with?
Well, I want to talk keto
Okay.
because I'm a runner and I've been a runner for many years. And so, of course, when keto came on the scene, I had a lot of people telling me that I had to do keto. You got to try keto. You're going to be able to run forever, burn fat, blah, blah, blah. And I was excited. I was like, okay, well, maybe I should try that until I started it. And I felt like I was going to die. I felt awful on it. And I was frustrated because there was a lot of medical evidence in the mainstream media at that point that this was the way to go,
Right.
that it was super healthy for you. I gag at the thought of the amount of fat that I had to eat.
Right.
So it was really challenging for me. And then I questioned, am I doing it right? Because there's all these elements to it. If you're really doing it right, you have to be in ketosis, which means you have to test. And like, do I want to live the rest of my life testing myself? So
Is that,
it's overwhelming.
it is overwhelming. And I totally think that if you're following a diet that you have to test your blood 2 or 3, 4 times a day and you're not diabetic, that you might be overcomplicating your life.
Yes,
Just thinking.
I agree with you.
Now, I did go on a keto diet for a while because I feel like as a nutritionist, I do need to have at least experience, life
For
experience.
sure. Yeah.
And so generally speaking, the keto diet, what the purpose is to shift your body from burning carbs for energy to burning fat for energy, right?
Right.
So you end up eating a very low carbohydrate diet, and everybody's a little bit different. So some people can get in ketosis and still be consuming, say, 30 grams of carbs. Other people have to be below 10 grams of carbs to get into ketosis.
Okay.
So that is very individualized from that perspective. Some people have enough; they're really good fat burners, and they can actually even have maybe even a day or a piece of dried fruit or something, and they don't get kicked out of ketosis. Other people, if they look at a date, they're out.
Yeah.
They really have to be super good. So so talking about the keto diet, who is really a good candidate for this diet? And the people that I think are really good candidates, obviously, if you are struggling with cancer and you're in treatment, I like the keto diet because it gets you away from the carbs. And it's really important when you're in cancer treatment to protect your muscle mass. And so we don't want to become catabolic. We want to really be in a nice balance. And so learning how to be a fat burner and getting good protein, it's a great diet.
Okay.
I also like it for people that have epilepsy. We've seen a really good result with people that are having seizures, reduce the seizures, and it's just a good diet.
And that's the fat content that's helping with the seizures, correct?
Right.
Yeah.
And then in obesity, right? So when people are dealing with a lot of excess weight, so we might even put them in the category of morbid obesity, this is a great kind of a metabolic reset for them. Really helps because your blood sugar levels are going to be so low. The glycemic load of the foods that you're eating is going to be so low that you're not stressing the pancreas. You're not having these big swings of blood sugar goes up, insulin goes up, blood sugar drops, and then we're on that roller coaster.
Right.
That's what can happen with some diets, and so I like the keto diet for that population.
Now, is that sustainable though? I mean, and when you say morbidly obese, what are we talking? How many pounds overweight at that point?
So it's different for men and for women, but we're really talking about a BMI of like 35 or higher.
Okay.
And so for women, I think we're talking, for men, the waist circumference of over 40 inches is considered obese. I think for women, over 35 is considered obese.
Okay.
So, and we really kind of get a clue of measurement of the waist measurement in terms of what's going on hormonally, like what's going on with insulin, what's going on with leptin, those kinds of things. That waist circumference is a guide for us. But for people with a BMI over 35, that's what we're talking about.
So this is a good way to kind of kickstart your journey.
Yeah, and it's it is. And it's a good diet done properly.
Okay.
I don't know that you need to be as strict. I think you could probably, get the same effects doing a paleo diet.
Okay.
Right? But with keto, you can't do no roots, no fruits, right? The root vegetables.
See, that just seems so like against my grain to think that I cannot have a apple,
or a carrot, or a turnip, or a beet, or foods are really incredibly healthy.
Yeah.
So, so it is a very restrictive diet, and I think, is it really realistic to think that you're going to do keto forever? I think probably for 99% of the population, it is not realistic to think you're going to do keto forever.
Yeah.
I think there's one individual that I know, he's a researcher, and he lives in Italy, and he goes all over the world talking about the benefits of keto diet. And he's been in ketosis now for about 6 years, maybe 7 years at this point.
Wow.
Been doing it for a really long time.
Uh-huh.
But I think, I mean, he's the exception, not the
Right.
rule, right?
Right.
And then some people play with this kind of pulsing going into ketosis. So going into
Like using it cyclically.
ketosis for a few days, a week. Yes, cyclical ketosis. So you can do that as well. There's some health benefits to that as well. But I think in terms of day in, day out, for most of the people in the population, paleo is probably a better approach than the keto diet. And you get to include those foods that are so nutrient dense, like your root vegetables.
Right.
And,
So can you briefly outline the difference between keto and
Oh,
paleo?
Sure. So with keto, we say no roots, no fruits. Also, there's no grains, right? Absolutely zero grains because it's a carb. And so you want your carbs really low. With paleo, you have a lot more flexibility. Still not doing grains, but you do get to do roots and fruits. So you can do some berries on that diet, and berries, blueberries, incredibly high in antioxidants, blueberries, blackberries, raspberries, strawberries, but you get to also do those root vegetables like beets, are so important for cardiovascular health, and carrots and turnips and radishes and, all these things that are just so nutrient dense.
Right.
But they do have, a little bit higher glycemic index. If you look at them overall and just look at the glycemic load, they're still very healthy foods.
Right. So would that be, generally speaking, I know everybody has, their individual blueprint and what diet would be best for them. But speaking generally for the masses, so to speak, do you find that paleo is probably the best diet to start with?
Okay, so two things. One, everybody has a diet that's best for them. It actually changes as we move through life. So what's really great for a child is going to be different than what's great for, a 20, 30 something year old. And that's going to be different for the person, 60, 70 or 80 years old.
Yeah. This is why I have to cook 4 meals in one day when it's just one. I always feel like that's what I'm doing because I have a 16-year-old boy and a 13-year-old girl, and she's a dancer, and he's in in martial arts, and I just feel like I'm constantly cooking for everybody's needs.
And so that's another thing. So if somebody's an athlete versus they're not an athlete, so cooking for those seasons of life, or being mindful about your nutrient needs as you move through the seasons of life is really important.
That's such a good point. And I don't think a lot of people think about that. Like, what are your needs now?
Exactly. Yeah. What are your needs today? And it's not what, the perfect diet for your 13-year-old daughter today is not going to be the perfect diet for her when she's 40, right? I mean, it's going to be different. Life is going to be different. So that's one thing. And then I forgot what the second part, my other thought was, but it's when we're looking for the diet that is best for us, we do need to take into consideration what is our genetic blueprint. Like, what is our profile? What are we going to thrive on? And so that's one of the things that we have to consider when it comes to, is paleo a really good diet for everybody? I think we have to make sure that people are doing the paleo diet right. I used to work in an environment where this guy would bring a hamburger patty every day for breakfast. And that was all he ate was, about a half-pound hamburger patty for breakfast. He said, well, I'm paleo. And I'm like, your kidneys are not happy right now. I can tell you.
Right.
So I think it's important for people to realize that eating a paleo diet isn't just grain-free and all meat, right? A good, healthy paleo diet has a lot of vegetables in it. And so it's the vegetables that are giving us this nice broad spectrum of phytonutrients and fiber, those things that are really important for our good gut health. And yes, we know that meat has a good nutrient profile. It's got wonderful minerals, it's got wonderful vitamins. But the phytonutrients, we're really just at the cutting edge of what do these phytonutrients do for us. And that is our plant food. We have to be getting the plant food in it, and we know that those plant foods are providing protection against cancer, providing protection against heart disease. So if somebody is doing a paleo diet right, and they have a lot of vegetables in, absolutely, that is a diet that is sustainable. It's going to be good for most people. Now, some people may need more meat than others, like your kids. They're being they're very athletic, so they're going to need more protein. And, when you're eating a paleo diet, that protein is coming from animal sources. So it makes sense for them to eat more animal sources.
Mm-hmm.
than say you would, unless you're also an athlete. Well, you said
Yeah.
you're a runner, so
Yeah.
but they're growing. Your 13-year-old daughter is still growing,
Yeah.
right?
I'm not.
Yeah, you're not. Right. So balancing that out and going, okay, my protein needs based on my athletic performance and her protein needs versus her growth needs and her athletic performance. It's going to be a little bit different.
Right.
So those are things to think and to take into consideration. But I do generally really like the paleo diet. I also like the Mediterranean diet, which
Yeah.
a long time ago that was really popular. Lots of
Right. That's kind of faded out, hasn't it? Like I haven't heard that term for quite a while.
right. But it's a really fantastic diet. And I like it because it is a diet that I think anybody could follow the Mediterranean diet long term.
Yeah.
You get to have some grains. It's
Right.
still primarily vegetable based, but you can have fish and chicken and meat, but you can have maybe a side of rice at dinner, and
Right.
rice boosts your body's ability to make melatonin, and that supports sleep, and sleep is
Oh,
important for everything.
right.
So, I do like the flexibility of having some grains in the diet, particularly whole grains, and that's what Mediterranean diet focuses on.
Right.
And it's so flexible. It's really not a restrictive diet at all.
Interesting. Yeah, I think people need to circle back and take a look at that one.
It is. It's a great one. I mean, it's really about eating that rainbow. I tell people eat
Right.
a rainbow every day, and they're like, "What?"
Yeah.
Just eat through Roy G. Biv, right? Red, orange,
Yeah.
yellow, green, blue, purple, white. We need mushrooms, we need onions, we need garlic. But
Right.
eating a rainbow every day is really important. And if you can eat 2 rainbows a day, you're really scoring,
Right.
points for your body. And you can do that with the paleo. You can do it keto. You can even do it Mediterranean. But that's the key. It's just eating those whole foods and making sure the bulk of your plate is made up of plants.
Right. Is it a good ratio then? I've heard over and over again, like 70% fruits and vegetables or greens, whole foods on your plate, and then 30% whatever else. So if you're going to do a little bit of grains and protein, that should only really take up 30% of your plate. 70% should be your greens and your
Yeah, I
vegetables.
think generally, and then you play with that ratio. Like for instance, my husband probably eats a lot more meat than I do. I mean, but he's a bodybuilder, and he's very muscled up, and he's a guy, right?
Yeah.
And he really does need a lot more meat than I.
Right.
I could, I jokingly say, well, I could be a vegetarian. For a while I was.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't need a lot of animal protein
Right.
to kind of sustain myself.
That's interesting because my son, 16 years old, that's all he'll eat. If he's just, I need meat. I need meat. That's all he says.
That's
But he's working out. He's burning all of that a lot. So
absolutely,
yeah.
absolutely, and growing. And he's going to
Yes.
be growing for another 8 years, most likely. And so
Yeah.
he's in that process of building. He's building muscle. He's building bone. And so he does need that.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. So one other thing I want to cover when it comes to these diets is a lot of people, like we talked about, they get really passionate about this diet because they've lost a lot of weight.
Mhm.
And I struggle with that concept a little bit because I think some of the people that have come on to the diet have basically changed drastically what and how much they're eating.
Right.
So is it been really the diet or is it just a calorie deficiency?
Right. I think it could be both, actually. People do change what they're doing and they think, okay, this is the key. But really, if you're starting to eat more vegetables or you're eating, whole grains versus processed grains, you are changing what's happening on a hormone level within your body.
Mm-hmm.
So insulin, when we eat something that's high glycemic and our blood sugar goes up, our insulin goes up. Well, that's a fat storage hormone, and it says to the body, if you're not out running, running a race, running down the road, your body's going to say, oh, we're going to store this energy for the
Right.
future, right? So you're just packing that away. But pretty much every diet is going to be low glycemic index kinds of foods, right?
Right.
And so you don't have those hormone swings anymore. You're not pushing your insulin up. So you're not actually asking your body to store that energy.
Right.
So I think that has a whole lot to do with, is this a good diet or is it not a good diet? Or this diet worked for me or didn't work for me?
I
I think
see.
when a diet isn't working, so I have a lot of people that come to me and, for instance, well, I won't say the name of this diet, but a national chain where
Okay.
people can go and get weight loss. and they're told that all they need to do are count their points, which is really just counting calories, and they're allowed
Yeah.
to eat chocolate cake. And then people just are struggling, like they can't lose weight. Maybe they lost weight at one point, but now they're not losing weight anymore.
Right. They get to a certain point where it
yeah,
doesn't work anymore.
and they're having their chocolate cake or their cookies or whatever, but they had saved their points for that dessert at the end of the day. Well,
Right.
you're still creating kind of a hormone chaos,
Right.
that food. And so that, in my opinion, is why those particular diets aren't working.
I like that term, hormone chaos. I like that because that's exactly kind of what this overload of sugar that so many of our foods contain now does to our bodies. And instead of looking at it like a fat problem, we really need to look at it more of a hormone chaos problem.
It absolutely is. I mean, you look at where we're putting sugar. I mean, we put it in peanut butter.
Yeah.
It's on our bacon. It's in our
Yeah.
sausage.
It's everywhere.
We've added it even to mayo and mustard. Why do we need sugar in those things?
Yes.
We don't want sugar in those foods. And so I think we've become, our taste buds have really become distorted, or our taste is distorted because of all the sugar that's in our diet. So if somebody really wants to do themselves a favor, go absolutely sugar-free. Like check every label. Go sugar-free for a couple of weeks, and I guarantee you food tastes different.
Absolutely. And you're much more appreciative of sweetness in taste, or even spiciness. I find you're just much more appreciative of the whole food taste when you've given up processed foods.
Right. Absolutely. And I tell people, just a lot of times people come into my office and they don't eat vegetables, or they might eat one vegetable a week. I mean, that's not good for me to see. And also, well, what do you like? Well, I don't really like vegetables. So I said, well, obviously we want to give sugar that 2-week break, but then I have them cook carrots 5 different ways. And I said, okay, just try carrots 5 different ways and tell me what you think.
Right.
People are amazed. Like, oh my gosh, so I don't like them boiled, but I really like them all these other 4 ways.
Yeah.
And it's just pretty interesting when you can regain that. You can regain your ability to actually taste food if you give up that sugar.
Absolutely. I think
and it has this far-reaching impact. You can normalize and optimize your hormone response to foods, and that's what's so amazing and fantastic. And it goes so much farther than just weight management.
Yes.
It goes to sleep. It goes to sex hormones. It goes to your blood pressure. All of that can start to normalize.
Right.
Approach it right.
Right. And I think if we're looking at things a little bit more as a whole, the motivation can stay and last. If you're thinking about temporary weight loss, like you really want to lose weight and you're so focused on the weight loss, it's hard to keep up that motivation if you're not seeing results quickly. But if you're looking at it from a general standpoint, where this is my entire health, which is how we should be looking at it.
Exactly.
It should be measured in a way of how am I feeling? How am I performing? How am I getting through the day?
Exactly.
You're much more likely to stick with it if you can associate. Like what I use a mental trick where I associate feeling bad with certain foods. Years ago, I started using this where, French fries, I automatically felt awful after I ate French fries. And I haven't eaten French fries for probably 20 years because I associate that in my mind with feeling just ugh after I eat them.
Yeah. Not a lot of people will take the second thought. They go, ooh, I want the French fry. And they don't take the time to think about how's it going to make me feel.
Right.
And so that is, you're kind of ahead of the curve there for what most people can think about. It's like, what is it going to do to me an hour from now or 2 hours from now?
Right. And I think that's so powerful though, because if you really put yourself there mentally, how you felt the last time you ate them and you felt bad, you're much more likely to not do that to yourself.
Exactly. Yeah.
Good. So why do some diets work for some people and not for others? I know we covered a little bit of that, but I want to kind of dive deeper into it because you specialize in epigenetics.
Right.
So maybe first what we should do is cover
what is that?
What is epigenetics? Because I know it's a hot topic out there and you can kind of read through it. And as I was preparing for our interview, I was doing more reading about it because I thought, I know what it is. It can really get down the rabbit hole.
Oh,
so,
Absolutely. And the information and the research is exploding. I mean, every single day there's new research coming out. So I'll kind of give you this umbrella perspective of what exactly this is.
Okay.
So when we have, everybody knows what that double helix looks like, right? We know that, okay, that's a gene. But every rung of that twisted ladder sits in protein bases. And these protein bases are designed to be in a very particular order.
Right.
And
everyone's is different.
Right. And that order is called wild type. And that's what the general population is, in the wild type. So we all have changes to those protein structure, the protein order, right?
Right.
And when you have a lot of these rungs to the ladder and the protein bases are out of order, it can reduce the efficiency of a gene. Some genes, it slows that gene down, and in some cases, it speeds a gene up. So we don't just look, we're not just looking at those protein bases, and we're not looking just at one gene, but we look at whole pathways. And so each biochemical pathway is made up of lots and lots and lots of genes, right? We might be looking at dozens of genes.
Right.
If we're looking at this pathway and we see, let's just for sake of this discussion say that there's 12 genes in a pathway. And we see a lot of protein bases that are out of order, let's say in 6 of those genes, then we can pretty much say that pathway is really sluggish and is not operating with as much efficiency as we would like. And so it creates a vulnerability in the body when it comes to health. It doesn't mean that you're going to have a disease, but there is a vulnerability in that pathway in your body.
Okay.
So, and we are all so incredibly unique. We all have different vulnerabilities. And one thing that I like to tell people is we're kind of like cars. When you get a brand new car, the upkeep required to keep that car on the road is minimal, right? All you have to do is an occasional oil and filter change, maybe check the air in the tires. That's about it. But when that car gets to be close to 10 years old, 20 years old, it requires a lot more upkeep, right? We're having to do transmission work. We're having to just do a lot more maintenance to keep the car running. It becomes less efficient. Our bodies are the same way. When our bodies are new, they're very efficient. So you see children, when they get sick or they get injured, they heal just incredibly quickly.
They fall and they bounce.
They do. I mean, you get a cut or a bruise 2 days later, you can't see it.
Yep.
Versus, there's our 80-year-old grandmother, and she gets a bruise, it might be there for 2 weeks.
Right.
So we get slower as we move on, and our efficiency starts to slow down. So we have to take that in consideration as well when we're looking at these vulnerabilities.
Right.
So somebody might have a vulnerability, but we're not going to see that vulnerability come to fruition until they're middle-aged or later.
Right. When we talk about vulnerabilities, is this what they use to diagnose people with maybe like the breast cancer gene?
Oh, so so there's BRCA1. That's what most people think about, the breast cancer. BRCA1, BRCA2.
Yeah.
Actually, and so if you are diagnosed with breast cancer and you go to the doctor and they say, okay, they offer you a genetic test. You get 2 or 3 different choices. I think the most comprehensive test that they offer is about 3 dozen genes. We don't see very many women actually with the BRCA1 or BRCA2. So they're saying, oh, that's only maybe 8% of the population.
Okay.
But if you do a lot of research within the medical community or medical research, you actually realize there's more like 175 genes involved in breast cancer. And when you look at those, they're not even counting our detox genes as a part of the 175. Now, I could really get on a soapbox here, but I'll try to just curve this really. The toxic load that we're carrying and our ability to detox this have a direct impact on these other genes, these tumor suppressor genes.
Okay.
So to look at just the BRCA1 or just the BRCA2 is like looking at a single piece of straw in a bale, right? It's just not going to be very telling.
But it's very reactive.
Right.
People are very reactive to that news.
Well, it's scary. When you look at that and you're like, oh my gosh, I have BRCA1. But I'll tell you, so I mentioned earlier that we have a family history of breast cancer. And I was running a genetic report on somebody who had just been diagnosed with breast cancer in my family. And I just ran BRCA1 and BRCA2.
Okay.
That was a 23-page long report.
Wow.
15, 23 pages of information.
Yeah, this is what I'm talking about, the rabbit hole. It gets so deep.
Right. It goes like, yeah, there were what we call SNPs, single nucleotide polymorphisms within that gene.
Uh-huh.
And there were some that were significant. Were they the SNP that we were looking for?
Right.
Probably not, but there were some weaknesses in that gene.
Right.
So this person's had breast cancer twice. And so, of course, I test all the other females in the family, and all but one of us, yeah, we have some weaknesses in our BRCA1.
Okay.
And so it's like, all right, so what does that mean for us? Well,
Mm-hmm.
we have to keep in mind that's just one tumor suppressor gene out of
Right.
all these others. So we have to take it into totality, really, when you're looking at
Right.
it. So yes, that would be considered a vulnerability. And you can make lifestyle choices today. And like in
Right.
cases of my girls, they're in their early 20s, they're already making lifestyle choices today to minimize that increased risk.
Right. Which is fascinating to me, this whole epigenetics thing, because like, why are we not tested when we're born?
Right. And it's
I mean, I hope that this is where we're going. This is your
yeah,
new baby boy. This is his genetic makeup, and this is the diet he should be eating.
right. Yeah.
I just feel like, why are we not doing that if we know this?
There's a couple, that's a really good question. There's a couple of different things. First of all, the information is still so new, and it's a little bit like looking at an iceberg, and we're seeing the tip, and there's so much under the surface that we don't know about.
Right.
Secondly, if with the way we do insurance, if an insurance company was to look at those genes and go, oh, that person has a really high risk of getting, XYZ disease, we're not going to cover that for that person.
Right.
A lot of people come to me and they want their epigenetics tested, but they want to guarantee that this information is not going to get out there. It's not going to be a part of their medical record.
You would think, though, that it's in the best interest of an insurance company to coordinate with the patient, to give incentive to have testing yearly and make sure they're staying up with where their health stats should be. Like, we should be rewarded for keeping ourselves in good health.
Yeah, that would be fantastic.
Yeah.
And that makes sense, but that's not what we do. In fact, insurance companies are very reactive, not proactive. I think there's a little bit of a shift, or at least a marketing message that they're trying to be proactive. But for instance, like with Medicare, if I have somebody that's on Medicare and they come to me, I am not allowed to run a test that looks at their micronutrient status, even though that's our number one disease prevention approach.
Right.
I can ask for specific nutrients only if I see very clearly connected deficiencies.
Right.
And I can guarantee, of all the people that I tested in 7 years, I've only had 2 people that didn't have frank deficiencies, but both of them had multiple borderline deficiencies. So when we're talking about, what is it that our bodies need to be optimal in terms of health, our bodies are fueled by the micronutrients, minerals, and vitamins, right? That's the fuel for our gas tank. And if we don't provide that fuel, there's going to be a breakdown.
Right. There's a dysfunction from deficiency.
Exactly. And so we're not even allowed to test that on Medicare patients. In fact, everybody that comes here is cash paid. The insurance company will not cover those kinds of tests. And so insurance would rather pay for somebody to be in assisted living in a dementia unit than keep an eye on a person's B12 level. And we know that if you run really low on B12, one of those symptoms is dementia.
Yep.
How cheap is a B12 shot? In the B12 test, it's really inexpensive, yet no one wants to take responsibility for that. And so,
we're not making enough money off that.
Yeah. Again, that opens a whole other can of worms, and I can really get on the soapbox about that. But
I'm on the same soapbox.
Yeah. So maybe that's your passion in life, or your vision is to now change what insurance does and how they do it.
Yeah.
And I think the younger generations are going to come up and say, no, this has to change.
Well, it definitely starts with awareness and how we make our choices as consumers in the marketplace. And we are consumers. We have to have insurance, but we buy that insurance. And essentially, we're the customer. So, when we start making choices that reflect what we want, not but well, this is all I have. This is all that's open to me. When we start demanding different choices, then that's when they'll have to change.
You know, another way of looking at the whole insurance model is if we look at health insurance the way we look at car insurance. You know, we take care of our cars. We do the oil and filter change.
Yes.
The tires have air, and we put new tires on when winter comes and we need more traction control.
Right.
If we do the upkeep, and if something big, bad, and awful happens, like we get in a car wreck, then we rely on our insurance.
Yes.
You know, really, when it comes to our health, do we want an insurance company telling us what we can and cannot do? I would propose that we don't.
No.
But we have catastrophic care, and that we take personal responsibility for what we put in our mouth, what our lifestyle looks like, what our sleep habits are like, and we take care of the maintenance.
Yep.
And then that kind of puts the insurance company where they belong.
Yeah.
They get out of our disputes and our conversations with our doctor, and they're there for that catastrophic stuff.
Yes, I totally agree. I think that's exactly where we need to head with it for sure. So how does this epigenetics affect our overall health when we take that into consideration? What can it do for us?
Right.
What can that knowledge do for us?
So, you know, it's we know that epigenetics play a role in our health. And that also our diet and our lifestyle, all that comes together. And some people I've heard kind of famous people go, well, your epigenetics, that's only 30% of your health. So don't worry about that part. I laugh. I go, okay, no worries. Give me 30% of your pay and we won't worry about the 30%. Or I'll take 30% of your house or 30% of your car. We won't worry about that. So it does, you know, if you could get a 30% boost of anything, you know, that you want in your life, that sounds like a pretty good boost. So when we just want to take it into consideration, it's not the only thing, but it's certainly a critical thing. Because we can look at those vulnerabilities and we can plan for those vulnerabilities. For, you know, going back to the breast cancer example, knowing that there's a family history of breast cancer, knowing that I have some BRCA1 weaknesses, knowing that those cancers that have shown up in the family are estrogen sensitive cancers, what does that look like for me? It means zero soy in my life. It means a lot of white button mushrooms in my life, right? Because white button mushrooms drive down estrogen levels. So, you know, I'm already making those lifestyle choices. So it gives us the information to get laser focused. And that's what we want. We don't want a shotgun.
No.
You know, I've had people come in to see me and they'll bring in giant tubs of vitamins, just giant tubs.
Right.
And once we know what their epigenetic profile looks like, I can go, well, you don't need that.
Yeah.
You know, that
we can get really focused on what you need.
Super focused.
Yeah.
Same thing, we can get focused too on the diet. So, you know, we were talking about keto and how fat dependent that diet is. And some people that can switch over to that and really utilize fat for energy, it's a great diet. But there are some people that have a genetic weakness that makes it really hard for them to even move fat into the mitochondria to be used for energy.
I might be that person.
I think you might be that person. Because I think you gave people a good shot. Didn't you tell me you did it for like how many?
45 days.
45 days.
Yeah. It was rough.
People, they're not moving fat into the mitochondria to be used for energy. And if you're telling the body, well, that's the only energy source you get, good luck. People like that are not going to do well on their diet. So having that, knowing what your profile is and knowing kind of where your weaknesses are, I think it's really good information, very powerful information if you're willing to use it.
Yeah. And of course, there's no guarantees. We're not saying here that this is the answer to your optimum health forever. But this knowledge is just, I mean, it can change the way you're living your life and you can have better results with how you're feeling.
You know, I think the key is, are you willing to take responsibility?
Yes.
You know, and if you are
that you're smart enough to take responsibility.
Right. So, you know, if you're willing to take that responsibility, and it takes energy. I mean, I'm not going to lie. You have to be willing to give it the time and give it the energy to be personally responsible for what you eat and how you live. But if you are that person, then absolutely, this is one of the best tools you can get.
Yeah. So, what would be the steps for someone that wanted to get into knowing about their epigenetics and stuff and really processing? Where would you say, where do you start?
Yeah. So there's a lot of products that are popping up on the market that are supposedly testing epigenetics.
Yeah.
And so I just want to put this into a little bit of perspective. We have about 25,000 genes. And we think about maybe 10% of those have a direct impact on health, right? So we are
Okay.
looking at thousands of genes directly impacting your health. There are companies out on the market going, we test 2 dozen genes or 3 dozen genes or 4 dozen genes, and we tell you everything that you need to know for a supplement for the rest of your life.
Right.
And that is really pie in the sky and not at all realistic. In part because where are you in life? Where are you on the, are you a child? Are you a teen? Are you 80? Where are you?
Right.
What phase of life are you in? Because your nutrient needs are going to be different. So we cannot oversimplify it. I think that's the goal for a lot of people. Then I just need to simplify this.
Right. So they
So,
can grasp it and,
yeah,
and
so we can
understand
really
it.
understand it. So I think we're making a mistake to do a very limited test like that. I like to work. There's a research institute that I work with in Pennsylvania.
Mm-hmm.
They produce a test called Your Genomic Resource. And that test includes information on thousands and thousands of genes.
Mm-hmm.
And I personally think that's the best one available to the layperson.
Mm-hmm.
When someone comes to me and they want that test, I simply, we process it. The test gets actually sent to their house, and it's just a saliva. They just spit in a little tube for a few minutes, and they send it off to the lab. Their name is nowhere on that kit. So the people that are analyzing that DNA they don't have their name.
Right.
So completely private.
Right. It's just a
Then
tracking number.
it's tracked with a barcode. So then
Yeah.
the barcode is sent back to the research institute
Mm-hmm.
where the name and the barcode are matched up. So I see it, the research institute sees it, and they're completely private. Unlike some other big genetic companies, they're not going to sell this list. I know the owner of the research company personally, and I've never met a man with more integrity than that individual. His name is Bob Miller. And he's not selling this information to anybody, certainly not to Big Pharma,
Right.
the way another big company did.
Right.
When I get that report back, I'm printing a report that's 164 pages long. That's a
Wow.
lot of information.
Yeah.
So I'm digging through that information, and that's just the general report that's presented. I can go deeper and look for specific genes, like in the case, when I was looking for the tumor suppressor genes
Mm-hmm.
in my family. So we can dig deeper as needed based on somebody's family history or on their diagnoses.
Or a certain concern that they have that they carry.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so we can get a lot of information. What I love too about this particular test and this particular research institute is, so I've had people coming to me for, like I said, about 7 years. And the first time somebody brought their genetics to me, we ran this report. It was 16 pages. And that same report is over 160 pages today. I guarantee you next year it's going to be over 200 pages.
Because they're just getting
Because
better
the
and better.
information, right. But you only pay for the test one time. You only take the test one time. And we continue to add information and discover more about those genes. And so you have access. That information belongs to you. You have it for as long as you want it. And every time you go back and access it, you can create your own account with the researchers. Every time you go back to access it, there's more information there for you to use.
Wow. So it grows over time.
It grows. And unlike other companies that are saying, we'll pay $200, like I get why they're doing it. It's very marketable and profitable for them. But in terms of the consumer, what's the best deal you can get? And I personally think Your Genomic Resource is the best deal you can get.
Well, it sounds like it. And what a gift to be able to have all that information so that when you come across trials in your health, you have this as a resource. And again, you're in control of what the choices that you make based on the science.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Right? You can't get any better than that, than to have your science right in front of you.
Right. Right.
So tell me, how can someone get in contact with you?
Okay, so the best way to reach me is through my website, and it's livingwellnutrition.com, all together, no underscores, no hyphens. Livingwellnutrition.com, and then they can schedule an appointment with me right there, and they can schedule a free phone call, And that's really the best way to get started, to find out, am I the right match for you? And, tell me a little bit about what's going on with you. And let's see if I have something that can offer.
You'll work together to achieve their goals.
Absolutely. What I see, people are on a journey, and I get to kind of cycle in for part of their journey and help them along the way. And that's really my role. It's just to partner with them part-time or short time, sometimes longer, depends on what's going on, and help them goal.
That's awesome. And I think you're doing incredible work there. And I'm really excited about everything that you're doing and how this is coming to the forefront in the more mainstream now. It's really exciting because so often we feel hopeless. Like this is my choice. I have this medication, I have this surgery, and these are my choices.
Yeah.
And with people like you taking it to this level, it just opens up the door for everybody and hopefully brings hope that, hey, there's other things that I can do.
Absolutely. It's so incredibly powerful, and it's so wonderful to be a part of this and to see. This is, in my opinion, the most exciting time in healthcare when it comes to chronic disease.
Yes.
Because, we are able to move the needle and help people in a way that just a strictly allopathic approach doesn't.
Right.
And it's exciting. It's really exciting.
It is exciting. And to think that we can think of terms of prevention more now is really exciting to a lot of people, and to me personally, but to a lot of people I know, because why not fix it before it's broke?
Absolutely. That's right. That's when it's easy to fix, right?
Right. Just make these simple changes and, don't head down that path.
Exactly.
Well, thank you so much, Kristy, for being on the Naturally Inspired podcast. It was a pleasure having you, and I learned a ton. So thank you so much.
Well, Tammy, you're doing great work, and you're getting the word out there. And so you are changing lives just by doing this podcast. It's really a service to the community. And thank you for doing what you do and really giving people this avenue of even getting information about how they can help themselves. It's cool.
Thank you so much. And thanks again for being on. If the Naturally Inspired movement makes sense to you, let's do this together and transform the medical model and help people take charge of their health. Learn more about how you can join the Naturally Inspired movement by going to naturallyinspiredadvocate.com or call me at 970-475-4862.